You guys saw in the Murdaugh murder trial, I mean, so much can be done with technology and computer simulation and measurements. And certainly the technology that exists today didn't exist in 2015. We all learned about the importance of phone mapping, and we intend to go back and look at phones, look at where they were, who he spoke to, who spoke to him. Stephen had to live a secret life. There's no question about it. Being young and gay in the Low Country was not an easy thing to do. It's not easy today. Certainly wasn't easy in 2015. He didn't hide it. He was proud of being gay. However, he had to be cautious. And people that have to be cautious have to be secretive. And so we're going to try to break down some of those secret walls. Sandy herself would like to know some things that she suspects. But, Stephen had to live a very secret, careful life. And we have to break down those walls.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So what you heard there from the attorney representing Stephen Smith's mother, Eric Bland, and what he was referring to was doing animations, simulations of, using the data from the incident scene and then being able to show what happened to Stephen Smith if something happened to him in the road. Alternatively, that you might be able to prove that nothing would make sense for him to end up in that position from some sort of collision. But that is exactly the sort of material, the sort of perspective that I took in the number 3 clue we all missed. And it does look like many of you have also missed that video. It's one of the least viewed, I think one of the most important analysis I've done thus far, and it's the least viewed video. Quite ironic. So if you're interested in this case and you're interested in simulating and getting a sense of how he ended up in that position and how realistic that is, please check out that video. Now, in terms of the number 4 clue we all missed, well, if we deal with Sandy Smith's letter to the FBI dated September 28, 2016, it's very clear, it's abundantly clear who her prime suspect is, or certainly was, in 2016. Do you think it's still the same person today, 7 years later? Right? And she also seems to be very certain that her son was murdered. Now, it is interesting that her letter predates the boat incident by 3 years. If it came after the boat incident, that would be one thing, but it doesn't. Her letter also acknowledges a few things about Stephen that many of us already know, that he was gay, that he was seeing a prominent older man, which even from her perspective suggests that he was in a relationship with one particular individual. And then also that Randy Murdaugh called offering his services as a liaison between the Smith family and law enforcement pro bono. Interestingly, there appear to be 2 versions of that story. One where the family accepted his help, and then Randy seemed to withdraw his help. He didn't answer calls anymore without explanation. And another was where their father, Stephen's father, was iffy about accepting Randy's offer and then ultimately not accepting it. We do know that ultimately Randy, I don't think, provided a long-term service, whatever he offered. But the other side to that story is that Stephen's father is deceased, so he's not here to tell us either way what he decided. Bear in mind that Randy contacted him. So the number 4 clue we all missed has got nothing to do with Sandy's letter. We will deal with her letter in a separate live stream at 4 p.m. Eastern later today. Instead, the number 4 clue deals with a few apparently throwaway details in the Smith file case notes. Those notes reveal what Stephen was doing the night of his death, and more pertinently, where he was. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Once again, I want to thank you guys for subscribing to Team Peachtree. It's a channel that focuses on positive, inspiring messages, also things like fitness and travel. Also, epic stories. There's quite a lot of content up already. Go and check it out. If you haven't subscribed there, please do. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So have a look at this excerpt from the case notes dealing with the Stephen Smith case. When asked, he stated he did not know of any trucks logging in the area, nor did he know of any particular trucks that would be running during the early morning hours. This is the pertinent bit. After we left Macmillan Farms, Lance Corporal Rowell was advised to ride the area further to look for farming or log trucks, and then this is the part, I went to Bobcat Landing, it should be capital B, capital L, where the deceased had supposedly hung out the night before swimming. So there we get an idea where Stephen was the night that he died. Not only where he was, what he was doing. He was at Bobcat Landing, he was hanging out there, he was there at night, and he was swimming. And so the officer who went there said, I didn't see anyone there or anything out of the ordinary. Now, according to the case file notes, Bobcat Landing is just north of Bamberg. Bobcat Landing is a swimming hole for some, basically a fun place to hang out, sort of a place where you would have leisurely activities taking place. You might do some fishing, picnic, or go boating. In mid-July, when the incident happened, it was the height of summer in South Carolina. So swimming, including at night, would make sense. Suppose it's also a place where couples might go, where you might have some sort of romantic experience. It also appears to be the sort of place where school kids might gather. According to the case file notes, Stephen went swimming at Bobcat Landing, possibly until late at night. If he drove directly from Bobcat Landing to where the incident happened, well, then he may have left at midnight. So it's possible Stephen had some sort of tryst with a boyfriend in the woods until around midnight before leaving the area and driving south. This is where things get interesting. It's just over 32.3 miles from Bobcat Landing to the approximate location of Stephen's vehicle. That's roughly 40 minutes of driving. If he had driven there from some other location, perhaps his home, and I believe his mother lives in the Barnwell area, just outside Barnwell. Well, if he now intended to return home, then it was at least 60 miles that he drove there and back in one day. And that raises the possibility, of Stephen running out of fuel. But there's something else in the case notes that suggests that Stephen was having engine trouble in general, right? That he was having car trouble in a general sense. And so let's go to that section. She stated that she found a smartphone and car keys in the deceased's right pocket. The phone was undamaged but could not get it to work. By the way, just something to mention quickly, the crime scene photo and the graphic showing the way Stephen's body was lying, they don't actually correspond. The way that his knees are faced and the way that you see them in the photo are different, just something to bear in mind. Also, there's a photo where his hand has got blood underneath it, yet in the original crime scene photo, his hand's on the tar. There's no blood underneath. So his body was obviously moved when that photo was taken. Anyway, it goes on to note that the phone was undamaged, but they could not get it to work. I think what that means is they couldn't access the phone. They couldn't use the PIN. They also located the vehicle of the deceased on Highway 601, a couple of miles from the scene, and also checked that as well. Here's the pertinent part. They went through the vehicle and found the wallet of the deceased and also noticed the gas cap was off. They also found engine oil in the vehicle and believed that he had vehicle trouble because they could not get the vehicle to start. And so what I think that means is engine oil in containers, because when you look at some of the incident photos, you see a number of plastic containers, and what's very pertinent to note, you can't read what it says on those containers, but they have their, what appears to be the rear side of them, the back side, facing the viewer, and the pertinent part to note is the shape, especially that horizontal section leading to the opening of those plastic containers. That tends to be the shape that containers are made for dispensing motor oil. It directs the flow in a gentle way to a narrow orifice that goes into the engine. And so I looked on Amazon and I found something similar. The Rotella brand, Shell Rotella, does have a similar shape to that, a similar color as well. The question is, what sort of brand were available? What sort of brands were available in 2015? So it goes on to note that they could not get the vehicle to start. And so this could be due to a blockage in the petrol tank, but it could also be due to overheating or an engine situation. Then it notes that since he was found between the vehicle and his residence, they believe that he was walking home when the incident occurred. So that's also pertinently noted in these case notes. He was found between the vehicle and his residence. And so one assumes that his residence at that time was somewhere in the area, was just trying to get home. And if he wasn't going to be able to resurrect his vehicle, might as well just walk home. When you look carefully at some of these images, you can see there are plastic bottles. Some of them may be OJ. I think one is definitely washing powder, but some of them may definitely be for engine oil. There's also blue material on the seat. That could be a sweater or a blanket. More likely, I think, the latter. On the front passenger seat is a red material. Not sure what that is. I suppose it could be a sweater or shirt or something. But we do get another image of a large plastic container. Did it contain engine oil? I do think it's those white containers that contain with a slanted vertical surface. I think those do contain engine oil. There's also a packet of biscuits or crackers below the wallet, and a hairbrush is lying on the seat as well. That also tends to reinforce this idea that possibly he was going somewhere for some sort of romantic interlude. It's also interesting that Stephen's route from the Bobcat landing south, it passes very close to Moselle, and it's the route one would take. If you wanted to go from Bobcat landing to Moselle, that is the road one would take to get there, if that's where you intended to go. So I think we need some clarity on where he lived at this time. And clearly the question that arises is, who was Stephen with at Bobcat Landing? He clearly didn't go there for some alone time. One wouldn't do that at night. And I think, and it's also quite out the way from where he stayed. You know, it is, I think the rumors and hearsay and certainly, and the certainty surrounding what happened that night are due to certain individuals who were either at the swimming hole themselves or knew someone who was. Also, Sandy's letter refers to several anonymous individuals who claim to know, seem to have quite a lot of confidence or suspect what happened that night and who was involved. And so that suggests there was some sort of social gathering. But the final entry into the case notes from July 14, 2015, 6 days later, almost a week after the incident, refers to another mysterious individual. So let's look at that. July 14th, 2015. I was contacted by Lance Corporal Rowell, who was with Corporal Duncan in Hampton. They had spoken with family of the deceased and advised he had an iPad and laptop that he was using under at least one alias, Noah Rivers, to go into homosexual chat rooms. They agreed to turn over Stephen's digital devices for that to be analyzed, and a warrant was obtained for those items to take to SLED. It would actually be good to read the details of that warrant. They also interviewed a subject in his 40s who was supposedly the boyfriend of the deceased, and one imagines that that subject in his 40s may have come up as a result of this warrant. It's not mentioned, but one makes that inference to some extent. And so there it is. SLED identified, interviewed, spoke to a man in his 40s, a man more than twice his age, more than twice Stephen's age, And this man said that he believed foul play had occurred, but his story was apparently very inconsistent. And he was, as a result of that, he was asked to take a polygraph, and he said he would, and then that has not yet occurred as far as we know. And so that would be, I think, a logical suspect. Someone who may even have been with Stephen at Bobcat Landing, right? And so one would want to establish where he was and what time he left and what time Stephen left and if he got into his vehicle and all sorts of other things. Did Stephen mention anything about his vehicle? So Sled did interview a man in his 40s who was regarded as Stephen's regular boyfriend. If Stephen had a regular boyfriend, then how could he be in a relationship with someone else? The 40-year-old told an inconsistent story, so much so that investigators wanted to polygraph him. Did that ever happen? If not, why not? Also, was this 40-year-old man at Bobcat Landing on the night of the incident? I mean, that would be one question you might want to ask during a polygraph test. In a recent article published by Fitz News dealing with Sandy's letter, the founding editor, Will Folks, writes the following, quote, "These connections and the allegations raised by Sandy Smith in a September 2018 letter, I think it should be 2016 letter, cannot be ignored. Then again, neither can allegations that Smith was engaged in what I have described previously as higher-risk behavior." Those are the words of Will Folks, saying that Smith's behavior was high risk. And he refers to numerous illicit liaisons detailed in files extracted from at least one personal electronic device, purportedly used by Stephen and in his possession at or around the time of his death. And so Will Folks concludes by writing, quote, "Everyone assumed it was the Murdaughs, but there were a lot of people in Stephen Smith's little black book," end quote. I'm finding a lot of people on my YouTube who seem to be insisting that it has to be Buster, don't think about anyone except Buster, and even people unsubscribing when I suggest that there are other possible alternatives. That is very dangerous, narrow-minded thinking. That is not trying to investigate and allowing the evidence to lead you. So please don't do that. Please don't have this sort of bias that blinds you to all other possibilities. We want to investigate this, and you've just heard the Stephen Smith lawyers saying that is how they're going to investigate it, with an open mind, with new eyes, with fresh people that are not biased. And I hope that you can do the same as well. Keep an open mind. Let the evidence guide you. Otherwise, this is nothing more than a witch hunt. And so I think if you take all of this together, all the intrigue, including Stephen going anonymously onto online forums, what do you think? Does this take us into the direction of foul play or away from it? Does this take us closer to a scenario of involvement by the Murdaugh family or away from it? Is murder more likely, or a hit-and-run accident scenario, is that more likely? And to me, the number 4 clue that we all miss that really stands out is this idea between high-risk behavior. And what I mean is someone who's having these trysts and engaging in meeting people online. We saw what happened in the Delphi case, what can happen in a case like that. If you take that idea, that psychology of high-risk behavior, and the scenario of driving around in a vehicle prone to breakdown late at night, taking those chances, taking the risk of, I'm not going to phone home to be asked where I was or who I was with, and then taking the risk to try to fix the situation on one's own. I'm going to just walk home. So I think the question is, did Stephen know someone in the area? Was he walking that way because that was just home? And is the most obvious scenario here the logical one, or is there some nefarious plot going on? Now, in order to address that question more fully, I may be doing a live analysis of Sandy's letter later today at 4 p.m. Eastern, as I said before. So look out for that. I'll put a link to that in a pinned comment. So please head there, hit the notification bell there, or the notify me bell, and then also please vote so long in the poll. Hope to see many of you there for a live discussion. I don't do too many of them. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.